Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. There we go. Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels. We're getting back to our Medicaid series. In particular, we are currently going over the funding that helps in regards to the multiple different supported employment programs that you can find throughout the entirety of the United States. A good majority of these programs are almost solely funded through Medicaid. Now, obviously, there are few issues there that I will eventually get to as we start bringing this series a little bit closer to a close, which, has to do with Medicaid being the gateway to all of these types of services, leaving people out in the cold who are considered not eligible for Medicaid. But the reason why we have to do this now is the individuals who are sitting in our House and sitting in the Senate have no conception under God in regards to what all the things, the different programs out there, the job programs, housing, direct care staff, assisted living places for the elderly and those of us with developmental disabilities, group homes, and psychiatric units. It's a very long list, and it's getting more pertinent all the time to make them aware that this is not just like a free health care program. It may have started out that way, but these days it's the sole funding for a good majority of the community-based programs that help assist folks like us get employed, stay housed, cover direct care staff, covering nursing staff, that otherwise we would have absolutely zero access to. You all have no idea how expensive those services would be on their own. So we're going to get into that. But first, for these videos, the trigger warnings as well as disclaimers are kind of all in one. As always, you are going to see the link to the document that we are going through now right there in the description box, along with all the other links that we have had in there as we've been going through this Medicaid series. Trigger warnings. Folks, on this channel, we do use profanity, and we talk about some pretty dark subjects, such as the things that go on at places like the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center, Agape Boarding School, Circle of Hope, Kennecook Camp, Tobin World, and that's just a few. So you will on occasion see vivid descriptions of and clips of surveillance footage of people with mental health issues and disabled people being tortured and abused. So when you're on this channel, folks, and you got young kids about, at the very least, please utilize headphones. And again, we do have this channel marked not for kids for a reason. Obviously, for the profanity as well. I can't help it. I am an Army brat who stepped out as not only a veteran, but also a truck driver. I was kind of doomed. So just letting you all know that ahead of time. If you have kids 16 and younger that are watching this, parental supervision is very much advised. If you are new to the channel, I apologize in advance because this is amateur hour. I do not know what all the bells and whistles are. And to be quite honest, this is one of the few areas where you'll actually see my laziness. I'm a little bit too stubborn to be trying to learn it now when I'm 40. There might be a time eventually when perhaps our president stops aging me 30 years every single day from his insane shenanigans, where I'll possibly be able to get to that, but now's not really the time. Alright, we're going to where we left off last weekend, to the methods. Now remember, this is a particular study done through APSI in regards of use of supported employment in Medicaid and CHIP working age population. It was the brief that was done back in 2019. The reason why I want you all to know this is so you have a good idea of just how many people use these job programs that get a bulk of their funding through Medicaid. This is especially really pertinent to talk about right now because we've already heard the president talking about mandated employment. Funny thing about that is he's putting that as part of the criteria to be able to stay on Medicaid without realizing by removing millions, later on billions of dollars from Medicaid, he could cause a lot of these places who provide those community-based job programs to shut down due to lack of funding. And they are barely, and I do mean barely, staying open as it is. So, let me go ahead and continue on here. Methods. In our analysis, we relied on the 2017-2019 TEF RIF. We used the demographic and eligibility DE file and 4 claim files: inpatient IP, long-term care or LT, other services OT, and pharmacy RX files. The DE file includes demographic, eligibility, and enrollment information for all Medicaid and CHIP beneficiaries enrolled for at least 1 day during the calendar year. The claims files include fee-for-service claims, managed care encounters, and financial transactions, such as capitation payments, supplemental payments, like supplemental security income, also known as SSI, and service tracking claims, paid for by Medicaid or CHIP. We've limited our analysis to Medicaid or CHIP beneficiaries ages 14 through 65, which we consider the working age population. It's also the general population they focus on when you get into transition age services. For the Republicans out there, because we live in a world where I apparently have to clarify this now, when we use the word transition in regards to going over Medicaid and job programs, what we are talking about specifically is the general age where services begin to bring you over from your educational high school community-based services into adult services. So, they start at the age of 14 because they like to build up on the life skills just about as early as they can. Usually about 14, 15, there's a lot of encouragement, for example, to start building skills and relationships by going out and volunteering at places like Cox Hospital or Mercy Hospital, for example. There's other places as well, including the ARC itself and TCO, a few other places, but those are the main two out here to help start building those work skills and start kind of really building a resume up. Also, and I know this from experience, those volunteering jobs where you begin to build the skills makes your resume look really good to a lot of employers. In fact, I was encouraged, but when I was going through it, to include all the volunteer work I had done already within schools and what have you, to include in there. Because it does make you look good, right? Okay, so when we say transition age services, we mean when you are transitioning from being a high school student to either going directly into the workforce and what those community-based adult services look like, or you're going into second education on what those adult services and what those supports are going to need to look like. Just to clarify, because that's the world we live in now. God help us all. Alright, now I'll continue. We limited our analysis to medical or CHIP beneficiaries between 14 to 65, which we consider the working age population. These are beneficiaries most likely to use supported employment services. We calculated the number of beneficiaries enrolled in Medicaid and CHIP in 2019 for the following categories: age 14 to 17 years, 18 to 24 years, 25 to 29 years, 30 to 34 years, 35 to 44 years, 45 to 54, 55 years and over, sex, male and female, race, ethnicity, white, black, Asian, American Indian, Alaska Native, Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, multiracial, Hispanic or unknown, geographic location, urban and rural, disability status, and chronic condition status. We then counted among the number of working age beneficiaries how many had claims for a supported employment services. I was one of those. I actually had access to both because I both used the supports for the secondary education. Since I had all those high school credits, I could spend over half the day over at OTC, which is Ozarks Technical College for the Graphic Arts associate's degree program that I've told you all about, as well as use the employment afterwards because, much to my very young early 20s frustration, in spite of that degree, nobody was willing to hire me in the field, and I was having extreme difficulties in really getting anyone to hire me. So I began utilizing at that point those employment services. And they do those age groupings for a specific reason because, as we all know, as we age, supports change as well and what those need to look like. So, yeah. Alright, I'm going to stop babbling and continue to read here. Alright, we use certain data elements in the tab RIFs to identify supported employment service claims, beneficiaries with a disability, and beneficiaries with chronic conditions. To find supported employment claims in the working age Medicaid population, we use national and state-specific procedure codes and other tab data elements such as type of service, benefit type, and taxonomic codes. We used enrollment records in the DE file and claims files to identify people with disabilities, including eligibility groups that indicate disability or programs that are exclusively for persons with disabilities, like the one I got involved in. Through ARC, we identified beneficiaries with potential chronic conditions using CMS standard approach, which is available through the Chronic Conditions Data Warehouse. I actually had to switch primaries in regards to my overall treatment program because I began through Burl. And although Burl did give me the community integration and all of that, they didn't, at least during that time period, really have the type of community-based job programs that I was in desperate need of at the time. So that's when I first began to get introduced and involved with ARC. The CCW algorithm uses diagnosis codes and procedure codes and claims data to find beneficiaries with a chronic condition. Now, we kind of already went over this, but I'm going to read it again, and I apologize in advance. It's just been kind of one of those space cadet brain fog, autistic brain fog days for me today, and I should not be allowed to operate large machinery. To ensure the accuracy and completeness of this data, we use data quality assessments featured in the Data Quality DQ Atlas. Data for any state are considered unusable based on Data Quality Atlas thresholds for the following topics: total Medicaid and CHIP enrollment, OT claims volume, diagnostic code, procedure codes, professional beneficiary information, race and ethnicity, zip code, and linking of service claims to beneficiaries. Appendix A provides more details on the methods we use to identify supported employment claims, beneficiaries with a disability, and beneficiaries with chronic conditions. Of note, this analysis did not investigate how states use Medicaid authorities to fund supported employment services. It relies only on claiming to investigate the use of supported employment. The reason is, folks, is because it is literally different for every single state. There is no uniformity across the board here in regards to how those Medicaid funds are used exactly to fund these types of programs. The way it is done out here in Missouri is literally Medicaid is sole funding. Literally. You don't get Medicaid, you don't get the services, unless you're willing to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars every month out of pocket. And that's just for employment services. That's not talking about the more expensive, more medical intensive things you may need down the line. So, yeah. Other states do it different ways. There's no uniformity. There's no a single way to do it for every single state. So that's why they're doing it the way that they're doing it. All right, findings. Of the 52 million Medicaid and CHIP beneficiaries ages 14 to 65 in the 47 states we analyzed, 144,128, less than 1%, had a supported employment claim in 2019. Figure 1 shows the distributions of age, sex, and race ethnicity for all working age beneficiaries compared with working age beneficiaries who receive supported employment services. If you guys want to know why that number was so low, do you remember when I told you in the 2010s when we took that massive hit to Medicaid funding? And do you remember what I told you about it? How our state had to go back and actually redefine the criteria again in a more narrow way in regards to who we were saying were eligible for Medicaid, because there just wasn't enough money to go around. Yeah. When that happened, so did this. It was an automatic drop in how many people were using the employment programs because there just wasn't enough money around to cover everything. So the only ones who have access to those services are those who fit the more narrowed criteria that's been around since that time period, which means they prioritize those who are considered more medically fragile or folks who really needed that extra support in regards to mental health. Individuals who would maybe be a little bit less likely to go in that direction. This is particularly true for the folks who are more medically fragile, like the folks who live out in sassafras. Now, don't get me wrong, they live full lives. Believe me, I know. I'm friends with them all, and I go over to visit on a semi-regular basis. But you get what I'm saying there. All right, let me go ahead and continue here. Beneficiaries receiving supported employment services are disproportionately older, male, and white compared with general working age population in Medicaid. For example, few minors ages 14 to 17 receive these services. Of those who received the services, 57.7% were male, but males make up only about 42.7% of working age Medicaid beneficiaries. When examining the race and ethnicity distributions, only 5.1% of beneficiaries using supported employment were Hispanic, even though 22.5% of working age Medicaid and CHIP population were Hispanic. I do think part of this is a messaging issue, a resourcing issue, which means that in regards to those services actually existing, you have a large portion of our folks who don't even think to ask. They don't know that these programs are out there to be able to help them. So that is a part of it. It's not the larger part, but it's definitely a part of it. All right, so here's our figure 1, distribution of demographic characteristics. You can kind of see here what they were saying in the black and white up there. We're not going to go too hard into the tables today. Autistic fog brain is autistic fog braining, and it's just not a good idea. We will circle back to it later. Disability status and chronic conditions. Figure 2 compares the distributions of disability status and chronic conditions between beneficiaries receiving supported employment services and those not receiving services. Receipt of supported employment services was much more common among those with a disability, and several of the chronic conditions compared with other beneficiaries, as would be expected, given that these programs generally support persons with disabilities. The largest portion, at least when I was still working with the state, that were involved in these community-based job programs and secondary education programs, are those of us with developmental disabilities. That is the largest portion. Second largest are the folks that are a little bit older, like towards the end of middle age and going into their 60s. For example, although 16% of working age Medicaid and CHIP population had a disability, 78.2% of working age beneficiaries using supported employment were identified as having a disability. Likewise, only 2.1% of working age beneficiaries had an intellectual or developmental disorder, but 61.2% of beneficiaries using supported employment were identified as having an intellectual or developmental disorder, and only 23% of all beneficiaries had a behavioral health condition, but 50.8% of beneficiaries using supported employment had a behavioral health condition. Now, autism and my autistic butt kind of has ourselves in an odd situation here. Because on one end, we are accepted as folks with developmental disabilities. And on the other hand, they also still consider it a behavioral health condition because of the behaviors that come out of us. That's not neurotypical friendly. We'll just put it that way, right? So, I would say there's probably quite a few that fall into that little pigeonhole there, where we may be called behavioral health, and we do show up in the DSM-5, but it is in all actuality a developmental disability. Not part of the subject, but just something interesting. All right, we're going to close out for this particular video. I do got to follow it up with tomorrow's video because tomorrow's Easter. There shall be Mass. And then there shall be glorious spaghetti with all the fixings, including fresh crumbled feta cheese. And there's going to be fresh oysters in there, and it's going to be awesome. So, I'm going to go ahead and get that pre-recorded for you all, but in the meantime, we don't get very many comments on these videos, and the few we do tend to get removed from time to time. So if you could, folks, please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and please, folks, don't forget to hit the comments. I do appreciate your time. As always, we here at Spilling Tea hope you have a good one. Happy Easter Eve, folks, and Happy Easter if you don't catch the other video. Bye-bye, everyone.